What's up, guys? My name is Joe. We're back with another episode of British Guy Reacts, and today we are reacting to the weirdest taboos from around the world. If you are new to the channel, please do click the subscribe button. We're trying to race to 20k and we kind of slowed down a little bit here, so help the channel out. Click that subscribe button, give the video a like, comment down below, and let's find out what some of these weird taboos are. Let's go.
An American man decides it's time to see the world. Within a week, he's in a foreign country and he's already been invited by a local in that country to share a home-cooked meal with his family. 3 hours into that meal, he's as happy as a man can be. Meanwhile, he's unknowingly been raining insults down on his hosts. Can that happen? As you'll see today, yes, it can. A lot of people breach a taboo in foreign countries just as soon as they enter a person's house. Why? Because they don't take their shoes off. In some countries, such as the UK, it's fine and dandy to just waltz into someone's house with your shoes on, at least if your shoes are clean. Sure, some people might ask if they should take them off, but you won't upset your hosts if you don't. As a general rule of thumb,
I don't know about that, you know. I would say if you were a polite being, you would definitely ask before you entered somebody's home whether you could if you need to take your shoes off. You wouldn't just walk into somebody else's house with your shoes on without asking. I would say that would be considered to be rude, even if it is clean, especially if it's a carpet floor. If it's a wooden floor, some people wouldn't care, but a carpet floor, 100%, you got to take your shoes off. I don't know about that one. Maybe that's just my family and friends, but
some people might ask if they should take them off, but you won't upset your hosts if you don't. As a general rule of thumb, when you're in Asia, never mind which country, it will be seen as rude if you enter an abode with your shoes on. Your hosts will likely not know it's not a custom in your country, so you will come across as ill-mannered. This show isn't just entertainment, it's a lesson for you that can make global travel that much easier. In most of Europe, you can probably keep your shoes on, although the person who owns the house might have a policy about that. It goes without saying that if your shoes are caked in mud, you should take them off. In Eastern Europe, it's different. Most countries have a shoes-off policy. We're not going to mention each and every nation, but just bear in mind that outside of much of Europe and North America,
I'd say if you're having like a house party, you could leave your shoes on if it's a wooden floor.
Take them off. As we learned when traveling in Asia, it pays not to have holes in your socks in those countries. Now,
guys, if you are enjoying these videos on this channel, please do subscribe to the channel. 84% of people watching these videos aren't subscribed, and it's absolutely killing us out here. Let's try and get these subscriber numbers up. Click the subscribe button. Helps out a lot. Cheers.
Now for something you really wouldn't have known. In Russia, you should take off your shoes when entering a house, but one other thing we learned about this country is you should also take off your gloves before you shake someone's hand.
Okay.
Apparently, it's a sign of disrespect if you don't take them off. It makes sense if you think about it.
Does kind of make sense.
Dirt on them, while bare hands are kept pristine under the gloves. Also in Russia, once you've taken off your shoes and gloves, you still shouldn't shake hands if you are standing in the threshold of a doorway. You're not supposed to shake or embrace until you're inside the house. Why? A travel company we found said Russians, likely just some Russians, see this as bad luck. Let's say you want to make the best impression in Russia, and so you've brought some flowers with you. Maybe you picked up a dozen roses before you went to the house. That could actually go the wrong way for you, because the word on the street is an even number of flowers are given when the occasion is a sad one, such as a funeral, and for a happy occasion you should go with an odd number. It sounds a little superstitious, but people all over the
That is kind of weird. Like, is someone really going to count the number of flowers that you give them? And if you're buying flowers, you have to count them before you give them. That's a bit of an odd one. But each to their own.
Superstition. It usually depends on where you are in the country, though.
Just spitting at the cat.
Thailand, for instance. People who live in swanky neighborhoods in Bangkok might have different beliefs from people who, say, live in a small village in the mountains in northern Thailand. In that country, when you meet new people, you generally stay hands off. People why each other, like giving the prayer sign, but you generally don't maul a new person, and you certainly don't kiss strangers on the cheek. This could happen in some parts of Bangkok, though. But in most of Thailand, you just don't touch people very much when you first meet them. Men certainly don't get touchy with women in a formal greeting situation. If you did this, you'd look a bit like an animal. And if there are older people around, you should show some respect. You will often see younger folks walking past older people with a slightly bent posture. That's because they don't want to loom over them. Remember, in this country, the head is a very important part of the body. You certainly shouldn't grab someone's head if you don't know them very well. This could go down very, very badly.
What kind of guy is going up to someone and grabbing someone's head if they don't know them?
Feet are the lowest part of the body, so you should never point them at people's
Just randomly grabbing a guy's head.
Tourists have been called out in Thailand for putting their feet up on the backs of others' chairs, sometimes on seats and minibuses.
That's a horrible thing to do anyway.
Seem like a big deal to you, but it'll make you look like a real pig. Tourists still do it all the time. They also make out in public, which again is a big taboo in Thailand. Thais save
Okay.
that stuff for the privacy of their own homes. No one will deny you a peck on the cheek at the airport when you say goodbye to your lover, but tongues down throats in the street will remind Thais of soy dogs stuck together during mating. In some parts of the Middle East, you can actually get in trouble for kissing in public. This is what a lawyer in Dubai wrote. Public displays of affection, as well as sexual harassment or randomly addressing women in public places, is liable to be punished by imprisonment or deportation. We're not kidding. In 2009, a British couple served 3 years in prison after being caught kissing in public.
3
After
years?
that, they were both deported. Instead of hearing the words, "get a room," you might instead hear, "go to jail." In many countries in Africa, showing affection in public is also a big no-no, but each country is different. On a radio show in South Africa called Cape Talk, they had a call in about public displays of affection, aka PDAs. Most people were okay with it, even though many callers said it just makes them feel lonely because they're single. As we said, how it's accepted or not accepted in Africa changes between each country. In most places where it's not acceptable, you'll just get some funny looks and not a jail sentence, but you don't want people thinking you're animalistic. We tend to think Northern Europeans and North Americans have fewer taboos. It's true that when visiting, say, Canada or Scotland or the Netherlands, you're likely to have less of a chance of upsetting someone by accident because you breached a local taboo. Still, in those countries, you shouldn't eat right off your knife. This is fine in some nations. According to Steven Pinker in his book, Better Angels of Our Nature, the reason Europeans stopped eating off their knife back in the day was simply that the continent went through what he calls a civilizing process. Knives were what people killed with, not for wielding at the dinner table. Table manners are a big thing all over Europe. In many countries, you also
Who eats off the knife anyway, really? It's not very convenient, is it either? I mean, if you're eating meat, you're going to cut it with your fork in the meat, cut it with a knife, and then the meat's going to be on your fork.
be expected to not rest your elbows on the table. This and not eating from your knife might seem like common sense.
I know
to
this,
many
but
of you,
I do put
in
my
many
elbows
parts
on
of
the
world,
table.
It's totally fine to do it. It's the same with slurping your food. Try doing that in most countries and you'll elicit some funny stares. But in China, you'll see and hear people doing it all the time. It's also okay in Japan. But be warned, people
Means
who
it tastes
like
good?
slurping, it is not okay in most countries. The reason why some countries are good with slurping is the noise shows appreciation for the food. In India and some other countries in Asia, you'll also see people eating with their right hand only. This is because the left hand is generally seen as a hand that gets dirty when doing the cleaning, especially cleaning yourself when you've been to the bathroom for a poop.
Okay.
In that country, and again, a lot of Asian nations, you don't hog your food as if you think everyone has just one plate. It might feel weird at first, but when you're dining with Asians, the food is often all shareable. Usually just keeps on coming too, so don't think it'll run out. We read a story of an English guy that went out with a young Southeast Asian woman.
So is
and
the
her mom and
English.
pop. Yeah, that can happen even during the first stages of dating. After all, the parents want to know you're a decent kind of guy. The parents treated him as is the norm because they were the elders. But this English dude, to be polite, kept finishing his plate. He'd grown up believing it was rude to leave anything, but the parents kept ordering more. That's because for them it was rude not to leave the table with lots of unfinished dishes on it. This showed they were not stingy, but in this case the Englishman ended up feeling like he was gonna explode like Mr. Creosote from Monty Python's Meaning of Life. If only both parties had learned about each other's customs and taboos. But it gets worse than that. Another thing in Asia that you shouldn't do is when you're eating with chopsticks, you shouldn't stick them into the food. This not only looks a bit ugly, but those sticks will look like incense sticks. And that reminds people of how food is offered to the dead. As for how you dress in Asia, you'd think it'd be common sense to know that in formal places you don't wear informal clothes. It's a sign of respect to dress correctly. Yes, it should be obvious, but you wouldn't believe how many people don't do it. For
Cover your
instance,
shoulders
most
and your
religious
knees.
places in Asia, women shouldn't show their bare shoulders. Asia is starting to sound rather strict, but this next taboo in a country in Europe sounds rather hardcore too. We're talking about Spain, and the fact that when you're there you shouldn't stretch or yawn in public. According to a website giving advice on doing business in Spain, it is considered vulgar. Ouch. I guess exposing that meat stuck in your jagged teeth might not look great, but when
Yawning is vulgar. That's an odd one. I've been to Spain a lot of times as well, and I never knew that. That's a weird one. I mean, some stretches, if you do like that full stretch yawn where you really go for your... You know what I mean? One of them. Maybe don't do that in public, yeah? I just did it on camera, but... Just a little yawn's fine, surely. I'd say it's fine.
a person's got a yawn, they got a yawn. Over in
Makes
France,
me want to yawn now.
you'd think there'd be a lot of social taboos. After all, the French invented the term faux pas, meaning false step. usually
pas.
relating to a social situation. The French, like many European cultures, tend not to ask personal questions when in conversation with someone they just met. You shouldn't ask about age, their job, money, or marriage. This might seem obvious to a lot of you, but again, head over to Asia and these kinds of questions will hit you from all sides. People there just want to get to know you, so they know your social status. But in France, those kind of questions are generally taboo. It's also taboo in France to flaunt your wealth in conversation, so unlike in some Asian nations where it's fine because it shows your social standing, the French might think you're crass for trying to look rich. Now let's talk about hand signals. As for the French, when someone makes the zero signal with their finger and thumb, it can mean worthless. For Americans, it can mean the opposite. It can tell you something it's just a-okay. So be careful when you do this sign, because you might just be telling them that what they've done for you is not great but absolutely terrible. As for getting yourself in big trouble, give someone the V sign in certain nations. It's thought this sign was an insult, with the palm facing inwards, originated in Britain. It means the same as when the Americans use the middle finger, but in Britain, as well as New Zealand, Ireland, India, and Australia, it's a pretty harsh insult and could get you into some serious trouble in the wrong parts of town. The Brits...
Depends which way you do it, right? If you do it this way, that means peace. If you do it the other way, it means F off. Middle finger's just rude. But again, if you did the middle finger that way, it doesn't mean anything. If you turn it around again, it means F off.
Like to say, people started doing this back in the 16th century, or so, as a sign to their French enemy. The legend has it that the British soldiers had some great archers, so when the French caught them, they chopped off their middle finger so they couldn't pull back the string of the bow. Showing the French those fingers then became a sign of disrespect. There's no evidence that this is true, but it sounds cool. Most people from other nations wouldn't give the sign anyway, but it is seen as cute in countries such as South Korea and Japan. That could get someone in trouble, although it's highly unlikely any Brit would take offense at the K-pop fan wielding their two fingers while on vacation. They also usually do it with the palm turned outward, which is a sign of victory for the Brits. It's the same with the thumbs up gesture. In some countries it tells someone the job has been done well, but it denotes an offense in other nations.
It's not a sign of victory in England for the Brits. It means peace. We use it for peace, not for victory.
In parts of the Middle East, sticking your thumb up like that can mean the same as giving someone the bird. That's why when you're hitchhiking in a country such as Israel, you'd be a lot better holding out your hand with your thumb pointing downward. Do it the other way and someone might just get angry with you. We haven't talked about South America much, so now let's head in that direction. In Brazil, it's supposed to be okay to be a little bit late when you have an appointment with someone, at least when it's an informal occasion. Like many countries in the world, you don't have to arrive somewhere right on the dot. This can infuriate expats who've moved to a country where punctuality isn't taken all that seriously. Apparently, most punctual countries in the world are Switzerland and Germany, while Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Brazil, Mexico, and China don't have so many demands on punctuality. Sticking with Brazil, if you're heavily mocking in conversation, it might not go down too well. Tearing into people or being really sarcastic might just be a natural part of life in countries such as the US and the UK, but Brazilians, we are told, prefer a more lighthearted approach to chit-chat.
Wouldn't expect that from Brazil.
Religiously in the USA, but if you tip in Japan, you might be considered rude. It's like offering charity to someone who thinks they don't need it. You also don't generally tip in most small restaurants or cafes in non-Western countries, especially if you're eating street food or paying for a haircut or a taxi. Then again, in some countries where people don't generally tip, it might be different if they're staying at a plush hotel or eating at an expensive restaurant. For instance, in Cambodia or Vietnam, there isn't much of a tipping culture until posh restaurants catering to tourists and wealthy locals opened up. At the end of the day, people are generally tolerant of your taboo breaking wherever you go because they'll likely know you're a foreigner and might not understand the local customs. You should probably just make sure you know the rules concerning greeting, eating, and touching people. You also should hold back on being loud, kissing in public, and cursing, but that should be obvious.
Yeah, like you said, you just got to do your research before you go somewhere, aren't you? And it seems like Asia is probably the strictest, but I did quite like some of the rules there. And the Middle East, obviously, the public displays of affection. Just avoid it. Just respect the country that you're in. When you're there, don't break the rules. And just, have a good time. If you did enjoy the video, guys, please give the video a like, comment down below, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you for the next one. Take it easy. Peace.